This is the Louie Tee Network.
In the lab room.
The views and opinions shared on this program are that of Louie Tee and In the Lab Room alone and should be taken exactly as they are given. If you are soft, easily offended, or can't listen to the criticism of your team, this program is not intended for you. This is pure, unadulterated football talk for the hardcore fan. Viewer discretion is advised. Welcome, you are in the lab room. I'm your host, Lou. Thank you for joining me here on this program. 2014 Lab Reports, Minnesota Vikings. Let's go. So you begin with strengths for the Minnesota Vikings, and this whole coaching staff has been revamped. You got Mike Zimmer in there, you got Norv Turner in there, and I'm putting a lot of the onus on them. But if you look at this team and what they're good at, you start immediately with the running game. And the offensive line has been really consistent for this football team in terms of opening up holes for Adrian Peterson in the running game. And this team does a lot of things well, especially on the ground. They led the league in rush touchdowns a season ago with 23. They were second in the league in rush yards per attempt. And so this is a team that eats up a lot of ground on the ground. And they're a team that if they can get some semblance of a passing game consistently, and they weren't that bad through the air last year, but teams need to be afraid that this Vikings team can not only dice them through the air, but also grind them on the ground. And so the running game is always going to be a consistent factor as long as Adrian Peterson is a Minnesota Viking, and he's still playing at an extremely high level. And this offensive line remains intact and continues to get better. They drafted a guard that potentially could start in David Yankee and enhance this offensive line. This is a team that really gets it done on the ground, and that is definitely a strength for this football team. You look at, and it's crazy because this is a football team that we know the quarterback situation has been in shambles, in tatters. Last season, it was a ugly carousel at the quarterback position. Christian Ponder, Matt Castle. We even sprinkled in a little bit of Josh Freeman last year. It was bad at times. It was terrible at times. Yet, the running game still managed to be a top 10 rushing attack. And so, you know, that's the strength for this Minnesota Vikings football team. You look at another strength for the Minnesota Vikings, and that is an explosive special teams unit. And more specifically, the return game is extremely explosive. And it's just the whole special teams in general, because the return game, I thought there were 3 elite special teams units in the National Football League last season in terms of returns, and everybody else was just either average or bad. And those 3 elite return teams a season ago, of course, were the Kansas City Chiefs. They led the league in return yardage and averages and touchdowns. They were up there at the top of the list. And then you had the Baltimore Ravens and the Minnesota Vikings. Those were your 3 elite return units from a season ago. And this Vikings team lit it up because of one man and the emergence of Cordell Patterson. C84 came onto the scene and he blew up. And this guy has an innate gift when he has the football in his hands. And Mike Mayock gave him the compliment last year of calling him the most explosive player with the football in his hands in that draft class. And I said to myself, no, it can't be him. It has to be Tavon Austin. Well, I was wrong, and Mike Mayock was right. With the football in his hands, there is not another player in the National Football League right now that can kick it into high gear, can take it the distance from anywhere on the field like Cordell Patterson. There are a lot of dynamic players in this league, but not many can do the things that he can do at that size with the football in his hands. And he really turned this Minnesota Vikings special teams around. Him and Marcus Sherrills also continues to be a solid contributor on special teams, especially punt return. He had a touchdown again last season, one against the Giants, that helped you win a game that was just whew, actually stay in a game. And man, was that an ugly game. That was really atrocious. But nonetheless, special teams is definitely a strength. You got a punter, Jeff Locke, that you drafted last year that has come in, and he's got an explosive leg. And your field goal kicking game, Blair Walsh, he is definitely a weapon as well. It's funny because you look at him and you don't want to say he had a down year, but after the rookie campaign that he turned in, where he set the NFL on fire with his leg at a 92% clip and about 6 or 7 for 7 from 50 yards plus, including some bombs that help you win and get a playoff spot in 2012. You look at his 2013 season and it wasn't as impressive. It still was an 87% clip of field goals made, and he still was a really good field goal kicker. It's just that, his percentage of touchbacks and the amount of 50-yarders that he made in his rookie season was so impressive that it almost was nowhere to go but down from there. But he is still one of the better young kickers in this league with an extremely live leg. And so this Vikings special teams is extremely explosive, much like the rest of this football team. And that is definitely a strength that they want to continue to take advantage of moving into 2014. So you go from the strengths of this Vikings football team to, and you know what? I want to throw in one more strength, because this Vikings football team is extremely, extremely volatile and explosive on the offensive end. And so I want to talk about explosiveness as a strength and volatility. This Vikings offense, if they could just find a signal caller, it is going to be one of the funner offenses in the league to watch. Because at every position, they've got a guy that can change the game at moment's notice. You look at the running back position. Do I need to really speak about Adrian Peterson? Not really. AD can run it all day, and that guy is the best back in all of the National Football League. Nothing has changed. That is still his title. He is still explosive, still the guy that you can hand it to out of the backfield, can run you over, can run around you, can run by you. He can get it done from any different angle, from any different place on the football field. He is the king of the running backs in the National Football League. At the receiver position, Cordell Patterson, C84, has come into the league and shown immediately why he was a first-round selection and why he is the type of player that once he learns how to run routes and how to be a complete receiver, once he learns the nuances of the receiver position, and I expect him to be even better in 2014 at the receiver position than he was in 2013. As a receiver, he's going to get better. But right now, just as a playmaker, just as a guy you can hand it to on a reverse. He had a touchdown at wide receiver running a reverse last year. He had a touchdown catching a bubble screen last year in that game against Baltimore. He had a touchdown on kickoff return. He had another touchdown on kickoff return. He was explosive. Every single time he touched the football, you held your breath in awe because you didn't know what was going to happen. I know as a fan and just watching the game and just watching Cordell Patterson, it was just fun. It was just fun to watch that guy play the game of football and run around and make things happen. And so he is definitely an explosive, volatile athlete for this Vikings football team. Jerome Simpson is another guy that can stretch the field, make things happen. You look at the tight end position. You just gave an extension to Kyle Rudolph. And this guy, when healthy, out of Notre Dame, big target, can run, very athletic, smooth, big hands, catches everything. He's a beast at the tight end position. So you look around the field and there's a secret weapon. Over, bring the secret weapon in right now. Bring him in. Over and out. Bring in the secret weapon. Shh. Don't tell nobody about the secret weapon. Just unleash him on them in the season. Jerick McKinnon. You know how I feel about Jerick McKinnon. That young fella there. He's going to cause some problems. And I love the fact that Norv Turner is the offensive coordinator in Minnesota because they're going to find ways. They're going to invent ways for Jerick McKinnon to get involved with this offense. I'm salivating at the prospect of McKinnon, Peterson, Patterson, all on the field at once. Sprinkle in a little bit of Kyle Rudolph. And watch out. That offensive set, whatever it is, however they decide to line it up, it's going to be a dangerous one. With that many playmakers on the field at once, that right there should be illegal. I can't wait to watch that. So, the Vikings definitely have explosive playmakers on the offensive side of the football. That is definitely a strength for that football team. So you go from strengths to weaknesses for the Minnesota Vikings. Looking at weaknesses for the Minnesota Vikings, there are plenty of them to go around. So we'll start with the defensive side of the football. And that's where you'll find most of the deficiencies on this football team. And that's when I knew it was time for Leslie Frazier to go. You know, when I looked at Leslie Frazier and his time in Minnesota and what he had accomplished, because even though he had gotten the extension after they made the postseason, and I thought he did a remarkable job because that team really wasn't good enough to make it to the postseason, but they did. I don't know how they were able to make it when you knew they were one-dimensional, when you knew Christian Ponder couldn't stretch the field, when you knew Adrian Peterson was going to get the football, when Joe Webb actually has to start a game for you. How is it possible that you can make it to the postseason? But they did. They, in fact, did. And so I thought he did a wonderful job. But one of the staples of a Leslie Frazier football team was defensive intensity and the ability to get off the field on third downs and to stop teams and get after them, sacking the quarterback. Well, last season, that didn't happen. And one of the reasons it didn't happen was third down efficiency. You know, and that's one of the things that we really don't pay attention to. But it was a glaring weakness last year. You only really pay attention to that kind of thing when you can't get it right. And third down efficiency is huge in this league because on third downs, that's the money down for any defense in the National Football League. You got to be able to get off the field on third down. Look, it's nice to stop a running play for no gain on first down. It's nice to only give up 2 yards on a check down on second down and make it 3rd and 8. But if you can't stop a team from picking up 8 yards or more on third down, then those first 2 downs went in vain. And the Vikings on third downs could not get off of the field. One of the worst third down percentages in the entire National Football League from a defensive standpoint. They could not get off the field. So these next 2 things kind of tie in to third down efficiency. And really, this is the hallmark of a bad defense. And this weakness here ties into another weakness that I'll talk about in a second. But time of possession, the Vikings were one of the worst teams, second worst time of possession on the defensive side of the football. So you're giving it up defensively, can't get off the field on third downs, so the time of possession becomes a problem. Now all of a sudden your offense can't get into a rhythm. They punt the football and they don't see it for the next 7 minutes in a football game. That's tough. As an offense, it's tough to get into a rhythm when your defense can't get you back the football and you're just sitting on the sidelines waiting and waiting and waiting. Going to be a while? Grab a Snickers. And if you looked on the Vikings sideline last year, a lot of people were eating Snickers bars because they weren't doing anything else but waiting for the defense to get off of the field. And with that time of possession comes yardage. Teams eat up a lot of yardage. And the Vikings gave up a lot of yards last season. Second worst amount of yards given up per game. So the Vikings struggled in a lot of different avenues last season. And so third down efficiency is something you got to clean up. You got to get off the field on third down. If you let teams pick up third downs on you, you're going to find it hard to win in this league. You're going to find it hard to stop teams from putting up points on the scoreboard. Speaking of which, let's go straight into, and that's a perfect segue to our next weakness: pass defense for this Minnesota Vikings team. They were terrible against the pass last year. Terrible. They were one of the worst teams defensing the pass. And you know how I talk about yardage all the time and how it's insignificant if you're not putting up points? Well, the Vikings gave up points with those yardage. Remember I said they were giving up among the worst amount of yards, the most amount of yards per game as an entire defensive unit, not just through the air but on the ground, but a lot of it came via the air. And they gave up 37, a league high 37 passing touchdowns. So if you could throw the ball and you had some receivers that could go and get it and catch the football, then you were able to shred this Minnesota Vikings defense through the air. And so you look around the league and you look at the teams that were bad a season ago, and they've all got deficiencies and some glaring flaws. And the one that stuck out the most to me for the Minnesota Vikings was the fact that they couldn't stop teams through the air. And we all know the expression, and I tell you this all the time, a wise man once told me, points in this league come through the passing game. You want to score points in this league and you want to score them fast, you do it through the passing game. And if you're giving up the most passing touchdowns in this league, well, you have a problem on your hands. Vikings also 31st in the league in amount of yards given up through the air per game. Again, another bad omen for a bad passing defense. You've got to find a way to stop teams. And this ties into third down efficiency. So you stop a team on first down for no gain. So you only give up 3 yards on second down, and it's 3rd and 7. That's a great down for a defense. 3rd and long. Anything over 6 yards on third down, it's tough for an offense to pick up. Because guess what? The defense knows you have to pass, so they can come with some kind of exotic blitz, or they can come with some kind of coverage to stymie the offense and get off the field on third down. You can pin your ears back. You can go after the quarterback. You know what's coming. You don't know what play is coming, but you know it's going to be a passing play, so you can go after the quarterback. Well, the Minnesota Vikings weren't able to stop teams from picking up 3rd and long last season. They weren't able to stop teams from picking up chunks of yardage against their defense. And no game sticks out in my mind about this Vikings pass defense more so than that Ravens game from a season ago. in the snow, 6 lead changes in the fourth quarter. You know, one of those games that was boring for 3 3/4 quarters. And then with 3 minutes left in the game, all hell broke loose. And nobody could play any defense, especially the Minnesota Vikings, who probably should have won after an explosive wide receiver screen / hitch caught by Cordell Patterson, takes it about 78 yards for a touchdown. And you're thinking this game is over. Minnesota Vikings pass defense in 4 plays gives it up in about 45 seconds to Joe Flacco and that Baltimore Ravens offense, who, by the way, weren't that good themselves last season. Shredded them up, went down the field, scored a touchdown, and win the football game in dramatic come-from-behind fashion. Vikings defense, pass defense-wise, was horrendous last season. They've got to clean that up. That's part of the reason why Mike Zimmer is your head coach. You go to another weakness on this team. Turnovers. Turnover differential. All right? We talk about this all the time in this league. You got to win the turnover battle. Well, last year, the Vikings were one of those teams that didn't win the turnover battle on a weekly basis. A -12 turnover ratio will get you every single time in this league. You look at all the teams and the turnover ratios and the teams with some of the worst turnover ratios, and you'll find teams that were at the bottom of their respective divisions and conferences. It's kind of one of these synchronicities that go hand in hand. You turn it over, you don't get turnovers, you lose football games. -12 turnover ratio for an entire season will make you a 5-11, a 4-12, a 6-10 football team very, very quickly. Take care of the football. You look at another weakness, penalties. 3rd most penalty yards from a defensive standpoint last year. And this kind of ties into everything I just talked about. The 3rd down efficiency, the time of possession on defense, the inability to get off the field on 3rd downs in addition to giving up passing yards and most yards. Because if it's 3rd and 12 and you get flagged for a holding penalty, that's an automatic 1st down. You just gave up a 1st down on 3rd and extremely long. If it's 3rd and 8 and they take a shot deep and you get beat and you give up a 44-yard pass interference play, not only have you just flipped field position if you had them pinned deep, but you just gave up a huge chunk of yardage to the opposing team's offense on one play. Personal foul penalties for hitting the quarterback late. Those come at a 15-yard clip. So those are tough to give up. Face mask penalties. You know, a lot of these infractions come at a price, and a big one sometimes, very costly. And the Vikings gave it up in yardage, not just penalties. We're not talking about the quantity of penalties. They had enough of those. Trust me. They had a lot of those. But the yardage stemming from those penalties shouldn't have been as egregious, but it was. And that means the Vikings were giving it up with pass interferences. They were giving it up with 15-yarders. They were giving it up with 10-yarders. They were giving it up in the large variety of penalties. And so when you're giving up a 22-yard pass interference penalty, when you're giving up a 46-yard pass interference penalty, when you're giving up personal foul and face mask penalties and roughing the passers, those are costly because they eat up yardage in a hurry. And the Vikings did that last year. Got to be more disciplined on the defensive side of the football. Once again, calling and paging Mike Zimmer. So you go from those weaknesses to camp battles for the Minnesota Vikings. So I'm here with the Vikings and their camp battles, and as you can see behind me, I've got the big board. He's going to help me out with not only these camp battles, but the experiment and moving forward. And so I want to jump right into camp battles because as you can see, this board is filled with a lot of different things that are going to shape and mold this roster for the Minnesota Vikings. So we start at the top. Got to start at the quarterback position, the worst type of battle that you can have on your football team. This is not a battle you want to have unless it's for the backup quarterback position. But this is for a starting position. So you look at the board, and there's a three-way battle here. Matt Castle versus Christian Ponder versus Teddy Bridgewater. Now, I don't know about you. I'm all about cutting the middleman out. If he's not necessary, get rid of him. And so, if you've been watching football last year, and the year before that, and the year before that, then you know that Christian Ponder doesn't need to be in this discussion. Take the middleman out. So, that leaves us with Matt Castle versus the rookie Teddy Bridgewater. So, the way I see this is one of two things. How fast does Teddy Bridgewater pick up the offense? He's a very intelligent quarterback, very smart, good head on his shoulders. I think he's going to grasp what Norv Turner is trying to have done. How accurate can he be within his offense? He was a very accurate passer of the football in college. What I'm concerned about is when he drives the football down the field. I think in the short to intermediate routes, he's going to be money. It's what happens when C84 is explosive and gets down the field and he's wide open, or Jerome Simpson is able to run past a cornerback in the slot and is wide open streaking down the field. Kyle Rudolph beats a man on a corner route running towards the sideline 25 yards down the field. Can he hit these guys in stride and give them a chance to not only catch the football, but catch it and make something happen thereafter? Those are the things that concern me with Teddy Bridgewater. Deep accuracy and his ability to pick up not only the speed of the game, but the offense that the Vikings are instilling with Norv Turner. If he can do those things competently and exceed Matt Castle in those departments, I could easily see him as a starter. I'm hearing out of Minnesota's camp that, hey, this guy has exceeded our expectations and that he should have been a top 10 pick. And so he's impressing them. There's no doubt about it. But right now, I think Matt Castle is the guy, because as a veteran head coach and a guy that is getting his first opportunity in this league, Mike Zimmer wants to win. And usually veterans give you the best opportunity to win at the quarterback position right away. Over time, Teddy Bridgewater is going to be the face of this franchise. But right now, Matt Castle might be the best answer. I don't know. I want to see some preseason action first before I can make a judgment call on that and see how I really feel about this quarterback, because I know Matt Castle isn't the answer. I can tell you that. He's a backup, and I'm glad he came back to Minnesota, but he's nobody's starting quarterback. So it's Teddy Bridgewater's job, but starting out the season, I think Matt Castle is probably going to be your day one starter, but we'll see. That's definitely the biggest camp battle that the Vikings have right now, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if Teddy Bridgewater came out victorious, but I expect Matt Castle to be your starter day one. You move on to wide receiver. 7 for 5. And so you've got 7 receivers vying for 5 spots. Greg Jennings, Cordell Patterson, Jerome Simpson, Jarius Wright, Adam Thielen, Rodney Smith, and Kane Coulter. So right there off the bat, a lot of those names sound familiar to you, and they should. Greg Jennings, Cordell Patterson, Jerome Simpson, Jarius Wright, all making this roster. So take them out of the discussion right away. It leaves you with 3 guys for 1 spot. This is essentially where the real competition is. Adam Thielen, undrafted rookie free agent out of Minnesota State by way of Mankato. He's a guy at 6'2", about $195, can do some things, is a very polished receiver, catches the football very well. I think he's going to compete to try to make this football team. Rodney Smith, a guy that was on your practice squad last season in his second year out of Florida State, has something you can't teach, and that size at 6'5", 200 pounds. He's a guy that has a huge frame, can pluck the football out of the air. Let's see if he learned a lot by being on the practice squad and competing against NFL caliber athletes for an entire season, if that's going to help him. The reason that Rodney Smith is hurt is because he spent a season last year running an offense that isn't being instilled in Minnesota and being executed in Minnesota any longer. So that whole season, it wasn't a total wash for him, but because they switched up the offense, he's not a step ahead of the other two guys that are vying for that last wide receiver spot. But again, can't teach 6'5". That's going to be something that'll help him if he's going to make this roster. And Kane Coulter, another undrafted rookie free agent, this time out of Northwestern. Here's a guy that primarily was a quarterback in college. They moved him to receiver, and he did a lot of different things, and he brings a lot of different things to the table. Can run some trick plays with him, and he's a guy that kind of sees the field from a different point of view. A lot of times when a receiver moves to quarterback or a quarterback moves to receiver, they see the game a little differently because they've been at multiple positions and they can understand different things. And so he's a guy to look out for. But to me, it's really between Rodney Smith and Adam Thielen that these two have a little bit of size, can do some things, and I think those two are the ones you want to look out for to try to gain that final spot on this football team at the wide receiver position. You move on to tight end, and it's a 5-for-3 situation. Kyle Rudolph, the aforementioned Kyle Rudolph, getting that big deal and extension for the Vikings. Rhett Ellison, Chase Ford, Allen Reisner, A.C. Leonard. So much like the receiver position, Kyle Rudolph and Rhett Ellison are making this roster. Kyle Rudolph, one of the most explosive, big-time pass-catching tight end threats in this league, and Rhett Ellison, a big physical blocking tight end that will catch the football. He's making this roster as well. So now you go to another situation where it's 3 for 1 this time, and Chase Ford, a guy that performed for you last year with all the injuries at the tight end position, he stepped in, gave you a little bit of production. So he's got some tape for the coaches to watch, see if he did enough last year and has gotten better as a tight end this year to remain on this roster. Allen Reisner, undrafted rookie free agent out of Iowa, is a guy that's going to compete. He's a guy that has a little bit of size, can catch, can block, but does nothing great. There's no definitive trait with Allen Reisner, so that might hurt him because this guy right here, the last guy on this list, A.C. Leonard, man, oh man, I wanted him myself. I wanted the Redskins, and it was being greedy. We didn't need any tight ends, but because of the athlete that this guy was, when I watched him at the combine, I thought he was going to get drafted. Despite all of the off-the-field issues, I said, man, somebody's got to take a flyer on this guy. I don't care if it's in the 7th round. I mean, he's too talented. And out of Tennessee State, you're thinking, well, if he's that talented, why'd he go to Tennessee State? Well, he started out at Tennessee. Couldn't stay out of trouble. Got arrested. Ended up being dismissed off the football team. Ended up having to transfer and go to Tennessee State to finish out his collegiate career. And I'm here to tell you, the most explosive athlete at the combine, at the tight end position, and he caught everything. I was saying, man, he's got big mitts, he's fast, he's quick out of breaks, he snatches the football out of the air. What's not to like here outside of the off-the-field behavior? If this guy can straighten it up here on the field, there's no doubt he can get it done. Now, can he block? No, but I don't care about that. We'll teach him how to do something blocking. But hey, if you put him in a game and you want to throw it to him, this guy's going to win one-on-one matchups. A.C. Leonard is making this roster. Okay? There's too much upside and potential here for him not to. Go ahead, move him over here. He's going to win that battle unless this guy just doesn't get it. And he can't figure out what the coaches are asking him to do. And he's not catching the football. Because the athleticism is going to jump off the page. There's no doubt about that. If he's not catching the football and he can't grasp the concept and the different concepts that they're asking him to accomplish, then he won't make the team. Maybe he'll be on the practice squad. But if he can grasp the concepts, route combinations, show a semblance and a want to block and catch the football, oh, he's making this roster. The upside is enormous. And there's no way with the amount of things that he brings to the table that he doesn't make this roster. So that's what I'm looking forward to looking at the tight end position for the Minnesota Vikings. You move on to left guard. And Charlie Johnson, without a doubt, was the weak link on this offensive line a season ago. He struggled at left guard. And so, hence, you draft a young man, and I'll talk about him in a second in the 5th round out of Stanford. But It's Charlie Johnson. It's a three-way battle here. Charlie Johnson versus Jeff Baca versus David Yankee. And that's the young man that I talked about being drafted in the 5th round. And it was an absolute steal. Okay? Those are the type of steals that land you in prison. Not jail, prison. That's grand larceny for getting this man in the 5th round out of Stanford. But Charlie Johnson struggled last year. And this is one of those rare cases. And I talked about this before with another team. One of the rare cases where a guy can go from starter to not even making the roster. Okay? Jeff Baca is a guy that offers you a little bit of versatility. He's younger. He's more athletic than Charlie Johnson is. And the upside might be a little bit better with Jeff Baca. Even if he's not the starter, as a backup, I think you might be even more comfortable with him than going back to Charlie Johnson. I could easily see Charlie Johnson go from starter to not making this roster because I expect David Yankee to come in and show why he was thought by many to be the best guard in this draft coming into the process. Had some lackluster times at the combine. And I told you, sometimes evaluators and even us fans, sometimes we get caught up in the hoopla of, 40 times and quickness and all this, that, and the third. The dude was a technician at Stanford. He was a blunt force trauma offensive lineman, a phone booth guy that would just beat you up. He was a mauler in the run game. He just beat you up. He was physical, tough. And there's something to be said about what he was able to put on the field in terms of tape week in, week out at Stanford. Yeah, he's not the fastest guy. What do I care about my offensive lineman running 40 yards down the field? It's nice if he could run, a 4.7 40, but he doesn't have to. If you've got a power running game like the Vikings do, then that's your type of guy. And I expect David Yankee to come in and snatch up that left guard position and win that camp battle at left guard. You move on to middle linebacker. This is a 3-for-2 situation at the middle linebacker position. Grass isn't always greener on the other side. That's what I was once told. And Jasper Brinkley found that out the hard way by moving on to what he thought was greener pastures in Arizona, struggling mightily, and then having to come back home. And so now he's got to fight for his life in Minnesota and fight for a roster spot versus two guys that are young, that are hungry, that I think have some potential in this league, and Michael Martee and Audie Cole. It's a 3-man race for 2 positions at the middle linebacker spot. And so if Jasper Brinkley comes in, shows why he was a standout for this Vikings team a few years ago, then maybe he can come back in and capture one of those 2 roster spots and maybe even start. But if Audie Cole flashes the athleticism and Michael Martee, who I think if he can just prove to be healthy, that's his biggest problem. A lot of knee surgeries, a lot of injuries, a guy that can't stay healthy. He's got toughness. He's got smarts. He understands the linebacker position. He's a guy that comes from a family that all they know how to do is play linebacker. So if he can just stay healthy, the kid has a bright future in this league. And so I could easily see Michael Martee. I could easily see Audie Cole saying, hey, this is my spot on this team, and you can't have it. You left, so you can't come back. And so Jasper Brinkley can be the odd man out here. That's going to be an interesting camp battle because 2 of these guys are going to be on this roster. One of them is not. So there's an odd man out situation here at the middle linebacker position. Going to be interesting to see who that guy is at the middle linebacker position. So you move on to cornerback. And look, this secondary needed to change. I talked to you about how bad this secondary was and how they didn't make plays and they gave it up. And so cornerback and safety both are issues for this team. There were some injuries, especially at the safety position. Harrison Smith missed a lot of time last year, and you felt his presence when he was on the field, and you felt his presence when he was not. So we started the cornerback position. And here's a situation where you've revamped the cornerback position. This does not look the same as it did last year, and for good reason. And so 8 for 5, 8 cornerbacks vying for 5 positions on this team. And so Xavier Rhodes, Captain Munnerlyn, Derek Cox, Josh Robinson, Marcus Sherrills, Sean Prater, Kendall James, and Jabari Price are all going to battle it out for for 5 roster spots. 2 of those already filled in Xavier Rhodes, X-Man. He's got 1 roster spot, and Captain Munnerlyn, a free agent acquisition out of Carolina, has another. Those 2 are locks to make this roster, and so you don't have to worry about them. So now you go to a situation where it's 6 corners for 3 roster spots. Derek Cox, Josh Robinson, Marcus Sherrills, Sean Prater, Kendall James, and Jabari Price are going to battle out for 3 spots. So you start with Derek Cox. And I think it's pretty safe to say that he's going to make this roster. Look, he struggled mightily last year. If you ask any San Diego Chargers fan, they're going to tell you he's the worst cornerback in this league. Don't listen to a San Diego Chargers fan on this one. He struggled last year. But you know, sometimes with guys, it's all about scheme fits and system fits and how do you fit in with what the defensive coordinator is asking you. And he got a big deal from them. He came in, he was smelling himself, and maybe he didn't fit into what they were asking him to do defensively in San Diego. I always like to think if you can play football, you could play football anywhere, but sometimes schemes fit you better. And I thought he played well in Jacksonville, just struggled to stay healthy at times. I thought he was terrible last year in San Diego. They benched him multiple times, and ultimately, 1 year into a 4-year deal, they cut him loose. That's how bad he was. So you're here to pick up their sloppy seconds, and I'm telling you right now, the guy can play cornerback. All right. Yeah, he's got some deficiencies, but at 6'1", 205 pounds, the ability to run, make plays on the football, there's something salvageable here with Derek Cox. So I'm going to say that he's going to make this roster. You can go ahead. Look, Mike Zimmer wants some veterans. He had a lot of veterans in Cincinnati in his secondary. And I'm like Mike Zimmer in that regard. I like my corners well seasoned. I don't like the young fellas at the cornerback position because it's going to be baptism by fire. They're going to, if you're going to put a young fella in the game, you got to expect for him to get torched and to get burnt a couple of times for him to learn, hey, I can't do that. What I used to do in college, I can't do that anymore. These guys are so much better. They're so much stronger. They're so much faster. You know, they're so much wittier. They understand how to run routes, how to set me up, double moves. Oh, it just can get ugly for a young man at the cornerback position. But sometimes you got to throw him in there and just let him learn. But if I'm Mike Zimmer and I want this defense to be much improved, you want to keep a lot of those young guys on the sidelines learning and watching. And so I expect Derek Cox, because of his experience and his ability to play, and he's still a relatively young man, expect him to be one of these guys to make the roster. Josh Robinson, young guy out of Central Florida, going into his 3rd season. I think there's a lot of talent here. He's shown flashes of talent, of ability, but he's also been very inconsistent. Now, I also think he's another guy that can make this roster just off of his ability. I think he's got a lot of speed. He's got some playmaking ability. He just needs to be coached up some more. And so, wouldn't surprise me if he also remained on this roster as well. He's going to have to fight, though. It's Josh Robinson because of these other guys behind him. Marcus Sherrills. Look, in years past, Marcus Sherrills would have a roster spot just because of his special teams prowess, especially on punt returns. If Leslie Frazier was still the coach, Marcus Sherrills would have a job. But because there's a new regime and a new set of coaches, including George Edwards, your new defensive coordinator, and Mike Zimmer, your new head coach, looking to revamp this secondary. If Marcus Sherrills can't be more consistent as a cornerback, he can't be saved by special teams alone anymore because there are too many athletic freaks on this team to keep this guy around just because of what he does on punt returns. You can find somebody else to field some punts, whether it's Jerick McKinnon, or if you want to put Cordell Patterson back there, or you want to stick one of these other guys that you have back there to do that, you can find someone else to take that responsibility head on, whether it's one of these cornerbacks that can run, whatever the case may be. But it doesn't have to be Marcus Sherrills anymore. And so he's got to play better at cornerback or he doesn't have a roster spot anymore. I could easily see him not making this team if he doesn't prove to be not only valuable on special teams, because like I said, he's one of the better punt returners in this league, but that's not enough to save him anymore. He's going to have to play some defense and play it at a relatively high level for them to keep him around on this roster. Sean Prater is a guy that was drafted out of Iowa a few years ago by the Cincinnati Bengals, was injured. So you see where the connection is. Drafted by Cincinnati, was injured, ended up being cut because he couldn't stay healthy, ended up with the Philadelphia Eagles, gets cut again, and now he finds his way to Minnesota. Well, guess who was in Cincinnati when he was drafted? You guessed it, Mike Zimmer. He must have saw something then that he liked. This guy's relatively young, has a little bit of savvy at the cornerback position. I wouldn't be surprised if he found a way to make this roster as well. Again, a lot of competition back here to try to make this roster. And then you got the two rookies, Kendall James, a 6th-round selection out of Maine, and Jabari Price, a late-round selection. I believe he was in the 6th round as well out of North Carolina. And so these two are young guys. They're going to have to come in and impress. They can run. They've got some ability to make plays on the football. They'll tackle. Those are two young, impressive rookies. They just have to come in and show that they belong. I wouldn't be surprised if both of those guys made the roster. I wouldn't be surprised if both of those guys were on the practice squad. Either way, this is going to be a heated battle for these final 3 roster spots at the cornerback position. A lot of competition. I expect Derek Cox to get one of those positions and 5 of these guys to be battling it out for the final 2 positions at the cornerback position. You go on to safety, and they were just as bad at safety as the cornerbacks were at cornerback. And so Harrison Smith is a guy that is a standout. He's one of the better safeties in this entire National Football League. But you look at this group as a whole, 7 for 5 spots at the safety position. Harrison Smith, Jamaica Sanford, Mistrial Raymond, Kurt Coleman, Robert Blanton, Andrew Sendejo, and Anton Exum are your safety group in Minnesota. And you start with the 2 starters from a year ago, Harrison Smith and Jamaica Sanford. They're making a roster. They're going to be around. And Jamaica Sanford is a guy that is unimpressive, but he's a solid football player. He's not going to make any plays. He's not going to knock your socks off, but he's a solid safety that will be on this roster. So those 2 out of the discussion. So you go to 5 for 3. And there's a who's list of guys here. Some guys with a lot of talent, some guys that have been around the league. And so you look at this list. Mistrial Raymond is a guy that is solid. He's going to compete, but I think he's going to be outmatched when it's all said and done in this competition. Kurt Coleman, journeyman safety, spent a lot of time in Philadelphia. He's okay, but he's not real as a safety. I think he's going to miss out as well. Where I think you're going to find the rest of your safeties is at the bottom of this competition. Robert Blanton, a big kid, 6'1", out of Notre Dame, been on this roster for a little bit, is someone that intrigues this Vikings organization. Played cornerback at Notre Dame, can also play safety. That's where he is right now. And he's been running with the ones. Okay? Jamaica Sanford has been banged up with a little bit of an injury. And Blanton has been running with the ones, and he looks really good right now. And so it wouldn't surprise me if not only he made this roster, because if he's running with the ones, he's looking like a surefire candidate to make this roster. So not only is he going to make this roster, he could be potentially your day 1 starter at safety if Sanford isn't careful. And so Robert Blanton going to make this roster. So you go ahead and throw him up there in the mix. So then you look at Andrew Sendejo. I thought he played well at the end of the season when you had all those injuries and he got an opportunity to play. He was running around. He was making things happen. And he's also a standout on special teams. I don't see how he does not make your roster. So you go ahead and add him to the mix. And Anton Exum, a guy with a ceiling out of this world. And so you look at him and his ability to give you some versatility because he can play corner and he can play safety. He's a guy that will run up, will hit you, can make plays on the football. He's a dangerous guy, someone to watch out for. You can't sneak him through waivers and put him on your practice squad. If he's going to be a Viking, he's going to have to make this team. I think there's too much upside for him not to make this team as a draft pick out of Virginia Tech. go ahead and throw him in the mix. There's your 5 safeties, if you ask me. Harrison Smith, Jamaica Sanford, Robert Blanton, Andrew Sendejo, Antone Exum. That's your 5 safeties, if you ask me. And so that's how I see these camp battles shaping up. You go from camp battles to the experiment that I have dubbed Purple and Skull. Skull Vikings. Haha. Experiment for the Minnesota Vikings. Research question is where we begin. Will the coaching changes along with the personnel moves be enough to raise the Vikings' status in the NFC North? Look, they made wholesale changes in Minnesota. You start at the top with the head coach and the whole staff. You start at the top drafting Teddy Bridgewater in the first round and really revamping the way this team is going to approach the game, especially from a defensive standpoint. You were terrible last year defensively, and so you got to get better. You go out and you get a defensive-minded head coach in Mike Zimmer, a guy that's going to change the game defensively for you. And then you get an offensive mind like Norv Turner, and sky's the limit for this football team. But with that being said, guys are going to have to step up, play at an extremely high level. You're going to have to get competent play out of the quarterback position. And these head coaches, and this new head coach is going to have to prove that he is in fact ready for the job. He's worked his entire NFL career to get to this point. Now he's here. Let's see what he does with it. Can the personnel moves be enough in addition with these coaching changes to help this Vikings team climb back up the ladder in a very competitive NFC North division? Hypothesis. If Mike Zimmer and Norv Turner can elevate the level of play on their respective sides of the ball, and AD is assisted by a consistent passing attack, then the Minnesota Vikings could be a contender in the NFC North. Look, I just spoke about Norv Turner and Mike Zimmer, and I know Mike Zimmer isn't the defensive coordinator. That distinction goes to George Edwards. However, if you think that he's not going to have a huge thumbprint on this defense, then you're sadly mistaken, and you don't understand what he was brought in to do. Okay, yes, he was brought in to be a leader of 53 men. Yes, he was brought in to not only handle the responsibility of being a head coach and making sure special teams was on point and the offense is running the way he wants it to, but he was also brought in to revamp this defense, make this a tougher football team, make them more defensive-minded. And so if you don't think he's not going to have a large hand in what goes on defensively, then you're just not paying attention in Minnesota. So Mike Zimmer is going to be huge, and I'm putting a lot of pressure on the coaching staff in Minnesota. I really am, because I think there's a lot of talent on this football team, a huge amount of talent on this football team. And I think that it's up to the coaching staff to get the most out of this football team. I really want to see them maximize what's left in Adrian Peterson's career. I want to see them maximize the amount of time he has left in this league, because he's been one of the most dominant football players at the running back position I've seen in my entire life. And I'd hate to see the rest of his career wasted on a football team that can't get it together, whether it's the quarterback position or this defense or whatever the case may be. I feel like they've got talent now, and I want to see them maximize what they have on this football team. And I'm putting the onus on the head coaches, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later. So we go from there to materials needed. ADD. No, not attention deficit disorder. All day, damn it. That's what I need. All day, damn it. Hand Adrian Peterson the football and watch that young man work. Rumble, young man, rumble. That man is one of the most explosive athletes I have ever seen in my entire life. And this goes for any position. I mean, some of the things that he's able to do, the start, the stop, the ability to beat angles with pure speed, strength, you know, everything, the ability to make guys miss, all rolled up in a big package You know, as a 6-foot back, he's a freight train, man. He's a load to deal with. And there's not one better in the business than Adrian Peterson. And so I want to see AD get the football all day long. And you've got some other guys on this roster that you can platoon in and out to keep him fresh. But we know at the running back position, the guy that gets the job done 10 times out of 10 is Adrian Peterson. ADD. All day. Damn it. Athletic superiority. I talked about this earlier with the explosive and volatile playmakers that the Vikings have on offense. And they've got to take full advantage of this. If the Vikings are going to have any shot in their division where points are going to be put up left, you got some of the most explosive offenses in your division. Okay? That's why Mike Zimmer was brought in, because you gotta slow some of these teams down. Look, when Aaron Rodgers is healthy and that Packers offense is clicking on all cylinders, they're one of the best in the league. We know Matthew Stafford and that Detroit Lions offense can score points with the best of them, and they went out and got an offensive-minded head coach that's supposed to take Matthew Stafford to the next level. So they're going to be looking to score some points in Detroit. Chicago, they might have the best wide receiving tandem in the entire league, and if Jay Cutler is healthy and he can fling the football around to those big targets, what are you going to do? So you got to score points in this league. And in that division particularly, you got to score points. And with all the weapons that you have, you got to get creative. And Norv Turner, again, I'm putting the onus on these coaches. Norv Turner is one of the best in the business when talking about offensive coordinators. And with the amount of talent that you have at receiver, at tight end, at running back, along the offensive line, quarterback is the question mark that you've got to fix. If you can find a way to do that with Cordell Patterson, C84, with Greg Jennings out there being the shifty possession receiver, the veteran that can get in and out of breaks, smart enough to run routes, you know, crafty enough to get open. Jerome Simpson in the slot, running around, beating slot corners. Then you go to the running back position with Adrian Peterson and the secret weapon, Jerick McKinnon. And then you go to tight end with a guy that just got an extension in Kyle Rudolph. Huge hands, huge target, can run a little bit faster than people give him credit for. And look, I think AC Leonard is another guy. I don't know how much playing time he'll see if he makes this roster, but that's another guy to look out for. Rhett Ellison can also catch it too. There's a lot of playmakers on this football team, and you got a really stacked offensive line. So, look, there is a lot of athleticism, and it's superior. I think you might have the most athleticism in your entire division. And that's saying a lot with the likes of Heavens, the Megatron, and what the Packers put on the field and what the Bears can do offensively. You might have the most offensive, athletic talent. Use it. Use all. A-L-L, all of it. Chill. Chill. Look, I don't know if you've ever been to Minnesota. Man, is it cold, man. It's cold as hell in Minnesota. Like, you go some places and it might be cold. It's cold in Minnesota. It might be snowing today in the middle of July. It's that cold in Minnesota. So, why don't you just chill on the penalties, man? Chill. Be easy. Okay? Chill with the penalties. Cool out. No, seriously. Cool out. Chill. Can't have the penalties. You can't give away yardage in this league. Can't give away freebies. Chill. With the turnovers, with the penalties, cool out. Bridging the gap. Now, you can take this one any way you want to. You could look at this as bridging the gap between Matt Castle as a starter and him buying time for the inevitable that is Teddy Bridgewater at the quarterback position. You could look at it that way. You could look at it as bridging the gap. Teddy Bridgewater coming in and bridging the gap between the rest of these teams in this division and the Minnesota Vikings at the quarterback position. The Vikings have the worst quarterbacking situation, the most unstable quarterback position of any team in that division. The Bears have their starting signal caller, so do the Detroit Lions and the Green Bay Packers. You're the only team that is indecisive and has had trouble at the quarterback position. Well, Teddy Bridgewater could be the answer. He could be bridging that gap. You can look at it any way you like. At the end of the day, you need to figure out who the quarterback is and get the most out of that guy, because this team offensively can be explosive and one of the most dynamic in the league if the quarterback is on board with what you're doing offensively. You move on. Pressure up. Pressure up. And this Vikings team, they got pressure last year. 42 sacks. Again, it's a really good number. Most teams would take that in a heartbeat, run with it. The elite teams, that's not enough for them. But you lost some sacks last year. You lost guys that got to the quarterback. Kevin Williams didn't get to the quarterback that much. Only had 3.5 sacks. But he was a leader. He was a stalwart on this Vikings defensive line. He's no longer here. Jared Allen, one-trick pony. Doesn't stop the run. Doesn't help you in the run game per se. But he did have that one trick. And I must say, that was one hell of a trick. And that was getting to the quarterback. He's no longer a Minnesota Viking. There's a lot of sacks no longer on this football team because of Jared Allen. So we're talking about almost, 20 sacks missing off of this roster. Guys they have to step up. I'm really talking to 3 guys in particular. You went out and you sought after Linval Joseph. I really like Linval Joseph. Want him to come in and step up and help this Vikings team get after the quarterback. He may not see the numbers escalate in terms of getting to the quarterback, but if he does his job, collapses the pocket, shows that quickness that I saw in New York, he's going to help you get to the quarterback. Speaking of which, look, I want to see Sharif Floyd take that next step in year 2. Thought that he dealt with some injuries and he was kind of learning the game and really getting feet wet. I need you to step up, young fella, and turn into a beast. They drafted you in the first round last year. Now I need you to flash first round, not only potential, but traits, and show why they spent that first round pick on you. Mike Zimmer had a guy, and you may know his name, you may not, by the name of Geno Atkins at defensive tackle in Cincinnati. Why can't you be the next Geno Atkins? I'm not saying, I'm just saying. And last but not least, a guy that commanded a lot of attention from this football team, and they hung on to him because they see a lot of potential, Everson Griffin. I'm talking to you. Pressure up. You're the man now. You're the big man on campus. You're the next guy on the totem pole. They gave you a lot of money. They flashed the dollars. They gave you the green. Now you need to be supreme on that defensive line. Need you to get to the quarterback, man. I need double digits. I need double-digit sacks. And if you extrapolate the amount of sacks that you got over a 16-game schedule with more snaps, you're going to be a beast. But I just need to see it. So pressure up. You drafted Scott Crichton in the 3rd round, another guy that can get to the quarterback. Pressure up. Go get the quarterback because you're missing a lot of sacks from a season ago. And finally, Zimmer. What are you going to do with this defense? And look, I'm going to talk about this here in a second, but I'm putting a lot of onus on these coaches because I feel like there's a lot of talent here, and it's up to these coaches to put guys in positions to make plays and maximize their abilities. And look, nobody has worked harder in this league to get where they are than Mike Zimmer. He's bought his time as a defensive coordinator, bouncing around from location to location and putting in the work and the effort to be where he is now. And he deserves this opportunity, and I want to see him take advantage of it, and I want to see him flourish as a head coach. And so it all starts on the defensive side of the football for Zimmer and getting the quarterback situation right. If he can do those 2 things, this team is going to be better a lot sooner than most of us think. And so you move on to the independent variable, Norv Turner and Mike Zimmer. For me, those 2 guys, are your independent variables, because I feel like this team and their success hinges upon them getting their respective sides of the football in order. If North Turner can get the Vikings offense off to a fast start, and I'm going to talk about why a fast start is necessary for this team a little bit later, but if he can get this offense off to a fast start and have them playing with confidence, this could be a dangerous football team. Now, it all starts at quarterback, because I know what you have at all the skill positions, at running back, at tight end, at receiver. There's enough talent to go around and make this team win 10, 11 games. Quarterback is going to be where you're going to separate yourself. Are you a 5-win team, or are you a 7-win team, or are you a 9-win team? Quarterback is going to be the reason that you're a 5, 7, or 9-win team, along with the defense and their improvements. So I'm putting a lot of the onus on North Turner to put guys in positions. Look, even if your quarterback isn't playing at the level you want him to, you've got enough athletic gifts, whether it's bubble screens to C84, or it's a reverse to him, or it's sneaking Jerick McKinnon, the secret weapon, into the football game and figuring out how to get him the football out of space and allowing him to be electrifying, or if it's just doing some things to make the defense be out of place so that you can hand the football, whether it's just a fake jet sweep to Cordell Patterson only to hand it off to Adrian Peterson and get guys out of their run fits so that you can run the football effectively. Whatever the case may be, you've got to figure out ways to make this offense go. And I'm putting the onus on Norv Turner. Mike Zimmer, same thing on the defensive side of football. The secondary struggled last year. I'm giving you all of those responsibilities to turn it up defensively, to get pressure on the quarterback, to turn that defensive line loose and get guys pressure and get them to the quarterback, to help these linebackers along, because there's a lot of young guys at the linebacker position, to help them along in their maturation. You got Barr out there. Now, you got a physical specimen and a freak at linebacker. Figure out how to use him. Figure out how to get the most out of him. There is a lot of talent on this football team, and I want Mike Zimmer to figure out how to get the most out of every single one of these guys and to get them to play as a collective group and unit, and figure out how to get off the field on third downs, how to generate more turnovers, how to get that -12 turnover ratio to be a positive instead of a negative. I'm putting the onus on those two head coaches, or excuse me, those two coaches. And so they're the independent variable, which leads us to our dependent variable. If North Turner gets this offense to play steady football on the offensive side of football, then the consistency on the offense will be present. So more consistent O and better D. And if Mike Zimmer, same thing. If he gets the defense to play, they just need to be better as a defense across the board. Every single department on the defensive side of football, the Minnesota Vikings need to be better, because they weren't last season. I didn't realize how bad they were. I watched all the games. I didn't realize how bad the Vikings were defensively. You know, there were some games where I'm like, man, that was pretty bad. You know, against the Baltimore Ravens. The ending of that game, that was pretty bad. Carolina Panthers coming in, smacking you in the mouth in your own house, putting up 30-some-odd points. That was pretty bad. But it was the other games where you lost shootouts to the Bears and you lost to some teams where you just looked around and you said, why did you just give up 34 points? Because you were bad on defense. That's why. So, better D, more consistent O. Those are your dependent variables. You move on to the constants for this Vikings football team. Offensive line and Adrian Peterson. So, essentially, the rushing attack. But this offensive line is one of the best and most stable in the National Football League. You got Khalil on one side, manning up your offensive line at that left tackle position. Then you move over to the other tackle position, and Phil Lowe is holding it down over there. Brandon Fusco, it can be spotty at times, but I think he's a solid guard in this league. He holds it down. John Sullivan at center. And then you go over to the other guard position, which I think is going to end up being David Yankee. This could be one of the most formidable offensive lines in the National Football League. And then you got the man behind the man behind the man behind the myth in Adrian Peterson. And I already talked about Adrian Peterson and what he is and future Hall of Famer, and yada, yada, yada. Look, this Vikings rushing attack since 2010 has never been out of the top 10. That speaks volumes just to how good they've been over time. The offensive linemen have changed, but the results have remained the same. And as long as Adrian Peterson is your running back and you continue to have horses up front along the offensive line, this team's going to continue to get it done on the ground. And that is a constant. Adrian Peterson and the offensive line. And so you end up at the conclusion for this Minnesota Vikings football team. What does this all mean for the Minnesota Vikings? Talent-wise, this is a 10-win team. 10-win football team on paper. Problem is you don't play games on paper. You play them on the field. And I'm here to tell you, remember I talked about that fast start and why it's important for them to get off to a fast start? You've got one hell of a schedule right out of the gate. I'm talking about you could easily start the season 0-5. And we know how it goes in this league. Last year you started what? 0-3 before you got your first victory overseas in London against the Steelers. It could be one of those type of starts. And if you start the season off 0 whatever, whether it's 0-3, 0-4, 0-5, usually things go downhill from there. And so you got to start the season on the road 3 out of your first 5 games, and all of them are toughies. I'm talking at St. Louis, we're talking at Green Bay, and there's another tough one in there. At somebody really good. New Orleans, that's what it is. I mean, come on, man. The Rams and the amount of pressure that they're able to generate on potentially Matt Castle, and God forbid it's Teddy Bridgewater week 1 against that front 7 on the road. I got a headache just thinking about it. New Orleans, they were 8-0 at home last year in the Superdome. Good luck. That's week 3. Week 5, you're at Green Bay. You struggle in Green Bay. They didn't even have Aaron Rodgers, and you couldn't even beat them in Green Bay. You had to tie them in Green Bay last year. You struggle when Aaron Rodgers is that quarterback in Green Bay. That's tough. That's tough. And then those other 2 games that's at home, oh, it's just Atlanta, who's revamped, who's got their stuff back, and New England. So, damn, you could be 0-5. You could be 1-4. If you come out of that stretch at 2-3, you should feel good. But I'm thinking more 1-4, 0-5 after that first 5-game stretch. Your season could be almost over at that point. So, this team isn't going to struggle in 2014 because of lack of talent. They're going to struggle because the quarterback position is going to be in flux and their schedule is so tough. Even though you got a last place schedule, you're not playing last place teams anymore. I just told you you're playing the NFC North, the division that you're in, and it's a really good division. Packers twice, Lions twice, Bears twice. Oh my. Then you turn around and you got to play the AFC East. They're getting better. There's some teams in there that are beatable. Buffalo, Miami. The Jets are no slouch and no pushover with their defensive prowess, but you got to play the Patriots. That's tough. Then in the NFC, you got to play the NFC South. That's a hell of a division. Carolina and that defense. You saw them last year. You saw what they did to you at your own place. Smacked you in your mouth. Saints at New Orleans. That's tough. Tampa Bay, they're much improved. That's tough. It's a lot of teams. Atlanta, I don't know. It's a tough schedule. So I said all of that to say this. For all the talent, first-year head coach, quarterback position, iffy, 5-11. I wanted to find more victories. I really wanted to find more wins for you. 7 wins, 8 wins, 9. I wanted to find more wins for you. But when you look at the schedule and the way it's constructed, the schedule makers didn't do you any favors out the gate. And I think because of your slow start, it's going to affect you mentally throughout the course of the season. Now, I think you're going to get better as the season wears on and as Teddy Bridgewater, because ultimately at some point he's going to start in this season. if he doesn't start the season off as a starter, he'll be starting at some point. He'll gain more confidence as the season moves along. You'll start to win games, and you'll be better because of it. But you're going to struggle, I think, right out of the gate. And if you don't, look out, rest of the league. The Vikings are going to make some noise. But if you come out of the gate like I expect you to, 1-4, 0-5, you're going to end up at 5-11, which is what I have you going in 2014. So that's going to do it for the Minnesota Vikings. Remember, if it happens in the National Football League, whether big or small, we cover it all here in the Lab Room. I thank you for joining me. Come back and join me 7 p.m. sharp when we'll be chronicling the next team up on the docket, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. See you then. Have a good one. Like the content? Want more? Sub up.